Okay, and we're back after a whole month of training in Silverthorne, Colorado. High elevation, run, swimming, biking, all of it, and just existing in the mountains. We're back in Chicago at last, finally. It's a bittersweet moment to be back. As you can kind of maybe hear in the background, it's like storming today as I have arrived. And yeah, basically I'm here to recap kind of what training at elevation felt like, my do's, my don'ts, my expectations, all the good stuff. I'm just here to break all of it down as I remember it, in addition to things I would do for next time. So, of course, before we get into it, make sure you like, subscribe to the channel. You guys know how this thing already goes, and if you're already a continued subscriber to the channel, thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Let's get into it. So, first things first. Expectations of Silverthorne, Colorado. So probably before I even get into that, let me give you a little history on Silverthorne. My family and I have been going there for a few weeks in the summertime since roughly 2017. We just found the place. It was just a sight unseen. We loved it ever since, and basically we've been coming back pretty much every single summer since then. And this summer was a lot different because, again, with my remote working conditions and races starting to come back slightly, there was a pretty sick deal on the property to live there for a month, and I wanted to give it a shot. So I put in, the money I needed for that to happen, and my family stayed for a little bit at the beginning of the trip, and then they came back for the end of it, and we all left pretty much at a similar time after that. So that's kind of the background story for it. We love the city. I've trained at it multiple times before, and it's a love-hate relationship, to be completely honest, but this time was a lot different than most. So, this is where we start kind of talking about the expectations overall. So, as you can probably guess, as I've actually mentioned in previous videos related to the Silverthorne series, the intention was to develop an altitude acclimation to start, building the strength and muscular endurance at altitude, in order to transfer that back down to a lower than 9,000 feet elevation. In this case, it'd be like 700, 800 feet in Chicago, to start increasing the blood and oxygen. I think it's the oxidation of the blood. That's the terminology. It's the oxidation in the blood while you're breathing and throughout your body. So when you come back from 9,000 feet and you're feeling lightheaded and you're experiencing like elevation sickness, or if you don't experience those things, great. But once you come back down to Chicago, you'll realize that your breathing is just much more full. You feel a lot more like you can hold your breath while you're running, and it's just basically a whole different kind of world when you come back down to this Chicago, I guess, this gross, smelly city that's extremely humid, which, again, we'll get into this towards a little bit towards the end, I suppose, as to why things are very interesting right now. But that's what the overall expectation was, to develop that acclimation for the Chicago Triathlon, have some of that residual acclimation for the Ironman Wisconsin 70.3, I think 3 weeks from now, and then if there's anything left in the tank for the Chicago Marathon, use it there as well. Now, here's just a little bit of a tangent. I am debating on rescheduling Ironman Wisconsin 70.3 because of the marathon training overall. I'll get into that a little bit later. Just kind of a thought that I'll bring back once we get there. So, basically, let's talk about the arts. Training-wise, it was not bad overall. The swimming is probably going to be the first thing I want to talk about, because I made major breakthroughs, in my opinion, in the water. One of those, of course, was something I've been experimenting with, which is like I've been swimming almost every single day, and I really enjoyed swimming at 9,000 feet in particular. I don't know what it was exactly. We were bouncing around this theory with my brother that because of the lower oxygen levels in the mountains, it plays some kind of role with swimming within the water. Not necessarily your breathing, because of course your breathing is a lot more difficult, but something is happening in the water at 9,000 feet that's a little bit different than if you were swimming at 800. We couldn't exactly pinpoint it. I couldn't do my research on it. I didn't really come up with anything, but I will say that I made tremendous strides while swimming. Also, it's probably important to mention that one of my buddies, Zach, who lives out in Boulder, came out to us for a couple of weekends, and I was swimming with him. I did some collegiate level workouts with him where I discovered that I'm much faster than like a 150 per 100 yard kind of swimmer. And I realized I can push it upwards to like 120, 130 if I really wanted to extend it for about 100 yards. Or in this case, I think it was, it was about 100 yards. And we also did some other workouts where, funny story, one of them is the sprint workout where you declare you can do 50 yards one way at a certain time, and then that remaining time is how much time your buddy has to basically rest before they go off on their set. And Zach was able to do about, I think, that 50 yards in like 12, 13 seconds, and he declared he was going to do it in under 15 seconds before. If he couldn't swim it above 15 seconds, then the whole thing was over, right? So I declared I would do it under 19 seconds. And the funniest thing about it was, as we were going, Zach was getting faster and faster and burning out because this is a sprint workout, but I'm keeping consistently at like 17 seconds, 17 seconds, 17 seconds, and it almost bores out the sprinters because like they can't break me because like I'm an endurance swimmer, not a sprinter. So after a while, that workout got kind of hilarious. But the point is you're supposed to do like 2 or 3 sets of it, and you're supposed to be just dead completely. But like, I'm keeping it consistent, it's fun, and it was just a really hilarious workout, and like Zach and I were just ribbing about it later. But basically, the story with all of that is that my swimming gains were absolutely tremendous. At least how I felt, in my opinion. All factors considered, with being 9,000 feet above sea level, like I really enjoyed swimming. I wanted to keep swimming. There were some days where like my triceps and like forearms and I think my shoulders were a little bit sore, but you know, that's kind of the point of the game too, is to kind of get beaten up as well. But yeah, overall, swimming, huge improvements on that front. Second thing we're going to talk about, we're going to go take the dark route here now, which is going to be talking about the run. So running overall was the big thing I wanted to focus on, but there was historical relevance to why I knew this running was not going to be great. And it's typically where my running route starts, which is at the house. Running to the reservoir, which is south of where we were living, is a constant uphill run for about 3 miles. So you're basically doing a 5K uphill all the way. It's about 150, 200 feet of climbing overall, kind of spread out, plus some hills, dips, some quick turns into trails. And after a while, I don't think it has much to do with the hills necessarily. I think it was just more to do with the recovery overall, which I guess this is something big we'll talk about after the run specifically. Every single day was getting harder and harder to run. And this is completely opposite to what my original hypothesis was, which was that if I was running every single day, it was going to feel easier every single day, and I would be able to put in more distance, be able to eventually run like a half marathon at 9,000 feet and feel flawless, and then be able to come down here and hold my breath and run like a marathon. But what I was noticing was that it was getting harder and harder to run longer distances every single day, and I couldn't pinpoint what was going on with it. And my original thought was, hey, maybe this gradual uphill running was part of the issue, that maybe I need to be on flat surface at 9,000 feet, kind of hard to piece that together, maybe like a track workout or something, and be able to essentially get the right workout in without too many, I guess, obstacles. Although the hill running is supposed to be a good thing, but in this case it just felt like it was getting worse and worse as it was going on. And towards the end of, you know, the entire trip, I was feeling burnt out from running. I just couldn't, like, get myself to run more than like 5-6 miles, and I knew like, hey, the Chicago Triathlon's coming up. I need to get these runs in. Like, the runs were not fun, and I don't think they were supposed to be. I think that's the point, right? You're supposed to struggle, you're supposed to have a tough time, and if you're jumping from 700, 800 feet of elevation in Chicago to about 9,000 feet, there's no way that should feel easy whatsoever. Now, this is another thing we were reading somewhere else, that there's a huge, I guess, theory in this case, where some athletes who train in Colorado Springs, where it's 7,000 feet, the Olympic Training Center is specifically there because 7,000 feet is like a sweet spot, whereas 8,000, 9,000 feet is a little bit more extreme. That's where things are more of an expert level for racing and training and whatnot. And that's possibly why the Leadville 100 is such a big deal, because Leadville's like almost 10,000 feet, I think. And it's one of the highest peaks of city in the world, to my understanding, not the world, in the United States. And basically, it's possible that Silverthorne is just too high. Maybe you need to be a little bit lower, like Colorado Springs, where it's 7,000 feet. Maybe this is why Boulder is the ultimate sweet spot, where it's like about 5,000, 6,000 feet, where it's not too intense on, you know, your adaptation and your elevation, and maybe you get just enough oxygen at 5,000 feet where you're not going to be struggling every single day. And the other thing I believe we're reading was the second half to this, which is some of these elite athletes who used to live in Boulder, or not Boulder, they would live in like 9,000 feet, but they would come down and do their training at like 3,000, 4,000 feet, those really intense workouts, and live specifically at 9,000 feet and just, do active recovery, sleep, rest, all that jazz at 9,000 feet just to get that adaptation in the lungs. It's possible that moving forward, that may be the right play when it comes to this type of training, especially if it's been tried and true on elite athletes, that maybe that's the game plan moving forward. Again, until the actual Chicago Triathlon this weekend rolls out and I see how I feel, we don't know exactly if staying at 9,000 feet for, the whole month with very little elevation change in between and doing all your training and all your living and all your recovery is the right move at that time. And on a better note, of course, let's talk about the biking overall. My only gripe with the biking was I wish the weather was a little bit better some days where you can actually, bike outside without having too much rain or too much snow or hail or anything like that. Basically while you're out there. There was a lot of instances, and this happens all the time, I think, in the mountains especially. I know this happened last year when I was in Flagstaff, is that you'll just get rain that just swoops right in for like 20, 30 minutes really quickly, and it just vanishes. And then you just have, a dry day because there's no humidity, so the water's not stuck on the ground, etc., etc. But basically, I do wish that there was a little bit more dry time so you can get on the bike, you can climb some hills, you can go as fast as possible along, the bike trails. You can try to do 30, 40, 50 miles at elevation and ultimately have a good time there. And that's to say that the biking was also, it felt like I made major gains on the bike while I was out there. And I think it's going to be true based on the results that, climbing for doing like KOMs and things like that out there are definitely a challenge, especially if you start at 9,000 feet and you eventually build like 9,500 feet. I don't think we ever got to 10,000 on the bike, but basically as you continue those climbs and things like that, it's going to do you well on the bike for sure. This putting that motion into it, getting that high heart rate, it all definitely plays a strong role in having a more endurance base for all of your activities, for especially the bike. And I think overall, any time I spent on the bike was really good time. And I think there's not much negative I can say in terms of my performance on the bike. Again, like the breathing was not bad because biking naturally, like easy biking is an easy heart rate activity. It's a low impact. Like it's hard to feel like you're exerting more than you really are while you're riding. And I think overall that was probably a really good thing. And it just definitely helped in terms of cross training, getting, the bike triathlon stuff prepped, getting in the position, playing around with the helmet. Overall, I thought it went pretty well. Just the only thing right now is that the bike is extremely dusty. It's extremely dirty from transportation, from sitting in the garage while we were at Silverthorne. And I didn't do a whole lot of bike maintenance while I was out there. I just didn't have, the tools to clean the bike, particularly with the spirits and all that. So my game plan, of course, now, when the bike shop's open tomorrow at the time of the filming of this video, is to basically take it in, get everything cleaned up, get the tires changed out because they've been balded pretty bad from both Zwift, from the roads out there. And if there's any other speed improvements I can put on this bike without Frankensteining it too much, I will try to do it. But yeah, overall, I think the bike did have some linear improvements based on how many times I've rode the bike while I was out there. Finally, let's discuss recovery and the overall thoughts on Silverthorne. So, as I mentioned earlier, like the running was getting gradually worse and worse, and I'm kind of blaming this on the recovery because like you could sleep for 9 to 10 hours out there, in and out because of like elevation. It's hard to sometimes be able to sleep. Sometimes you'll just have that altitude sickness and it's just hard to, fall asleep very easily. It's very possible that the recovery was just not all there, and that could be also a case of, the lack of oxidation in the blood, and maybe you require more rest than usual in order to have the same results as if you were at like a lower elevation, of course. So it's very possible that this was a huge role in why some of my training days just felt like absolute garbage, why I intentionally chose to take rest days from running overall, or some days where I would just run like 1 mile and just be like, that's it. And of course there's a lot of other factors that are in play there, but yeah, overall, it's not easy to recover at 9,000 feet. I think you have to take probably extra due diligence to get that done properly. And I was definitely not doing it because I took for granted what recovery felt like here in Chicago. So, anyways, speaking of which, let's talk about what it feels like to run in Chicago now versus being at 9,000 feet for a month. Basically, yesterday night, when we came back from, I think we drove to Lincoln, Nebraska, we stayed the night, and then we went from Lincoln to Chicago after that in a 2-day format. Basically, I ran last night, and lungs felt awesome. Now, my body was pretty beat up because we had this mountain run where I was doing uphills and downhills, and, like, my hips really hurt. My left knee was feeling kind of wobbly for a little while. But all of that, like, aside, once I was starting to run, like, the cardiovascular, like, the lungs just felt like steel. Like, there was no breathing issues or anything like that. I was running in the rain. It was a little bit cooler. It was perfect. Now, this morning, I completely forgot about this with Chicago in particular, is that it is disgustingly humid here when it's hot. Now, we were blessed, of course, with Silverthorne being like anywhere from 40 degrees to like 70 degrees, 75 max at any point in the day. So you would have nice cool runs every single day. Here, it's like 80 with maximum 100 degrees of, plus humidity. I think it's like 80% or something like that today. And you're running and then you realize like, oh man, like I can't breathe. Like, the muscles don't feel bad. You feel like you can breathe pretty well. You think you can kick it, but the hot, humid air is just kind of stalling you now. So, basically, it's a good thing that we got here a little bit earlier than the weekend of the race. Like, particularly, we got here, I think it was Tuesday night, and today is Wednesday, I believe, at the time of this video filming. And essentially, it's like, yeah, you gotta readapt to the hot, humid air that's out here, and you gotta definitely take in more fluids than usual in order not to like have a heat stroke or pass out or feel like the gains you made are going to be for nothing if you can't adapt to the humidity that's out here. So this is the new challenge now, and I remember this is a similar challenge in Florida where we were coming out of a zero humidity, like -0 in Chicago, and then coming to 80 degrees, extremely tropical conditions, and knowing that I would have to race 3 days after getting there, quickly adapting to what I guess was called poor man's elevation training, and in this case to those particular race conditions. And the trick with Florida was at the time, it was like the race day was like 65, which to them was a cold front, and that was like perfect for me. So obviously I walked in, I squashed it, killed it. And, yeah, it was a good time in Florida. So, yeah, basically, the summary here with Silverthorne, if I had to change anything moving forward, it's going to be trying to play more of the elite pattern here, which would be you live in Silverthorne, but you try to train in a lower elevation area almost pretty much every single day where it involves running. That's kind of like moderate to more difficult. So if I have the luxury and the car and the time to do it while I would be in Colorado, my game plan would be then to basically live somewhere at above 8,000 feet, whether it be Idaho Springs, whether it be Silverthorne, somewhere in that area, and then commute to Boulder for like the 30-40 minute drive down the mountain that it's required, do all the big training in Boulder, and then come back up and live in Silverthorne like for the rest of the day, do your swims and do your bikes up there because the cross training's not so difficult. That's what I would do next time for sure, but maybe the difficulty and the extreme burnout that I was experiencing at 9,000 feet while running might pay off on Chicago Triathlon morning. I don't know 100%. We're going to find out on race day. I will definitely talk about that and definitely vlog that as we get there. But yeah, this is my basic summary of Silverthorne. Overall, as a vacation and as a place to live, awesome. Lovely place, gorgeous views. Staring at huge peaks that were staring back at us, as you can probably see from my Instagram posts. If you don't follow me on Instagram, you should probably follow me there as well. And yeah, the training and the elevation just kicks your butt every single day that you're out there. But that being said, we're going to find out if a month of 9,000 feet training is in fact worth it. So, I'm going to end the video here. This is going to be probably a longer entry than usual, but you know, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to summarize, and I was excited to talk about it. So if you watched this entire video, awesome, I appreciate it. So, that being said, I will end the video here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys real soon.